Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2020 release and Shudder original A Nightmare Wakes, and this film is coming to Shudder on Thursday, February 4th. So since I'm releasing this review ahead of that, this is a no spoilers review, except for kind of spoilers a little bit with some thematic things in the film, but I won't really tell you, actual events or scary things or anything like that that ends up happening in the film. So just know that. Now, this was written and directed by Nora Unkel, and this is the individual's first feature film. Did a bunch of short films prior to this, so good job on making a feature film. That's awesome. The synopsis of this, I'm gonna make it pretty vague. So this is a film it's not gonna be for everyone, and I'm gonna say that while I'm doing the synopsis, basically. And you'll see why when I get to the synopsis. It's not for everyone. There are certain people who are not gonna like this type of film. There are going to be some people who just think this film's a little bit too slow for what it is. Some people are going to think there's not enough horror, it's way more drama. And then there are going to be some people who just love this for what it is, because it just hits that sweet spot for them. So it's a particular niche film in a sense, which I have to give it credit for doing that in certain ways, but also it also makes sure that, you are going to, put off a certain portion of the horror community who will just not want to watch this film. So, that said, the synopsis of it is basically this. A lot of people already know the story of Mary Shelley and how she came up with the story of Frankenstein. So it kind of takes a look at that, but it takes a little bit more of a modern look. It's still set back in that time, so it is a period piece, but it has kind of modern context given to the character of Mary Shelley and kind of compared in a way. And you'll see what I mean if you watch the film. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sense, but if that doesn't sound interesting to you, like period piece about Mary Shelley kind of creating it, it's probably not for you. But there are going to be certain people who kind of want to see this writer-director's take on who Mary Shelley was as a person, her theory on the characterization of that individual, and kind of putting that, like I was saying, putting that modern context on this person and who they kind of seemed to potentially be. It's taking a lot of liberties with who Mary Shelley potentially was, because we don't know a ton about who that individual was, but that's fine. And, that's what film is for, is to make these, I was going to say suppositions, but it's not a supposition. Just kind of create your own fiction around it. So the beginning of the film just raises questions with the way it starts, and that's a good thing. I think it raised questions in a great way. It really sets the film up in a very interesting way to say, what is really going on here? And what happens in the very beginning, that little scene, ends up tying into the film and into the very end of it with, some of the underlying themes at play. And I think this is a film that if you watch it a few times, there's probably a lot of extra stuff you can end up picking out of it. So that's a good thing if people want to get into it. It's a period piece, like I said, and I think I wrote down that I feel like that's a very ballsy move, because like I was saying, I feel like you're just naturally going to alienate a portion of the horror community. But, this may not have been created for, horror crowd in mind. It may have just been a film that was created and was like, it'll find a crowd, which I'm sure it will. The costuming, sets, and acting all keep with the period, which helps you be immersed in what they're trying to create. There's really nothing that pops up that takes you out of, the kind of environment, the atmosphere, the time period that's being created here. So that's good. I really have to kind of, give them a little clap for the continuity of that stuff, because that stuff's not easy to maintain, in my opinion. And I think one of the strongest things that keeps it going is really the acting. The acting in this is quite good. I think all of them did a good job. I didn't see a single actor in this film that I was like, they all delivered well. And I feel like it's not easy to deliver lines that are written in a much older time speak and do it convincingly and consistently and with a particular accent. So they did a good job with that. The music, I think, is well matched with this film. It never really is. There's maybe like one or two times where I felt like it was getting to be a little bit overdone, like a little too strong in certain portions. But for the most part, I think the music matched the scenes pretty well, and I don't think they overdid it much at all. I think they did a pretty good job of kind of restraining it, and I'm a big proponent of kind of, less is more when it comes to music. And actually, in the very beginning of the film, there's no music for a little bit, which really helps you focus on the sound design of the film. Which the sound design is pretty well done for this film. I'm a fan of the sound design, especially how it's used in the very beginning of the film, and kind of ends up being used that way a little bit towards the end of the film again as well. There is some free moving camera work that's a bit nauseating, as it doesn't actually stay smooth enough for my liking. Too much movement, up and down and all around is too much for me. It gets a little nauseating for me. I have a hard time focusing. Free moving camera work, not a problem, all good. But when it's, jostling way too much, like it does in this film from time to time, don't like that. I want it to be a little bit smoother. Now, if it's jostling for a particular reason, fine. I think in certain instances, it's intentional for that reason, because it can add to kind of like insight into how a character's feeling or their thought process, but at other times it just seems like it should not be. There are scenes that are way too dark, lighting-wise, not material-wise, lighting-wise, and you can't see that well. This is another thing I harp on with films. If you're going to make a film, even if it needs to be in a dark situation, make sure it's lit enough that people can see what's going on. There are a bunch of sequences where it's too dark, you can't really tell what's going on, and at that point, it's like, why is that even on the screen? Just have that stuff be off screen, because we can't see what's happening, So I think it would help people if they watch the film in a dark room, so that would help you see it a little bit better, but you shouldn't have to do that. So that's just one of the things I always harp on. There's a pretty dark lit, prolonged sex scene that I think was important. There's something important that happens tied to that. So I'm not going to say that it's an unnecessary sex scene, which there are plenty of films that have unnecessary sex scenes. This one does not, so kudos on that. But it's too prolonged. It's too long. It definitely needed to be shaved down. It had the impact with sometimes shaved down still. So, yeah, I just think it needed to be shaved down a bit. Mary Shelley as a character is imbued with a strongly independent spirit, which makes an interesting and complicated character for the film. So she is interesting. I mean, she is the focal point, obviously, of the film. So the characteristics that the writer-director gave her are interesting. It creates an interesting person that you are interested in watching. Now, that said, I do feel like the film drags from time to time. Actually, a little more than from time to time. It drags. The film drags, and it's an hour and a half, which is not good. If you have an hour and a half film and it's feeling like it's dragging, not good. And I think part of the reason, maybe for me personally with that, is that it's very heavy on the drama and not a whole lot of the actual horror. Although those things do tie together for the overall experience of the film. So, just know that going into it. The finale raises a question of how Frankenstein's monster ties into Mary Shelley's life. Kind of where did the inspiration come from? And you can pull some, hypotheses out of what you see in the film for how that ties in. Because when people are writing even works of fiction, it's coming from somewhere. It's coming from life experiences. It's coming from inspirations. Look at any writer, and talk to them about where things came from. Usually it's not just coming out of the blue. There's some sort of tie into their actual life, and that's at play here. So I think that's interesting. There are going to be plenty of people who will not watch this or will bail on it early because of it being a period piece and because of it being slow. I have to repeat that. If this sounds like it's up your alley, it's up your alley. If not, it's not. And that's okay. In the end, this is a look back on a known piece of history, but given context from the modern day. It's a look at the horror Mary Shelley was creating versus the horror created by society and potentially, well, not potentially, and her partner Percy Shelley at the time. Although, I'm saying that in the context of the story written here, not in the context of actual history. I don't know, actual history-wise, what that situation was. So, I assume that, well, I mean, maybe the writer-director does, because I assume there was probably research that went into this. This serves as a good reminder of where we are. Excuse me. Oh my gosh, I'm going to restart on that. This serves as a good reminder of where we are as a society and how far we've come by giving a modern spirit to an influential figure of the past and having them clash with their surroundings. That is interesting. Kind of like I was saying, it's taking a known story, but it's giving it kind of a filter through modern day and modern social norms, looking back at those older social norms. And, it becomes confining in a way, especially for a character that's very interestingly independent. So I will say that. Now, that said, my personal feeling on this film, I'm glad I watched it once. It was interesting. The filmmaking overall is nice from a technical standpoint, except what I was talking about with kind of like the shaky camera work from time to time and the lighting issues, and the fact that when it was edited together, some of the stuff could have been shaved down in order to not make it feel like it drags as much as it does. But other than that, good directing. Like I was saying, the music is really good. The acting is really good. The writing is solid. There are a lot of themes at play here and tie-ins to the actual Mary Shelley story. So I think it's ballsy to attempt something like this, and the fact that it was pulled off relatively well is good. It's good. So it's hard to rate something like this because it's not my wheelhouse typically, and like I said, like it dragged for me. There are things that bothered me, but overall, I would say when I kind of step back from it a little bit, with out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm going to give it a very solid 3-star rating. It is, at first I was feeling like, I'm very much in the middle, maybe 2.5. Then I was like, no, like the technical aspects and the script is pretty strong. Acting's very strong, so that kind of bumped me up that extra half. So 3 stars on this one. Now, I would be interested to find out what everyone else thinks about this film if and when you watch it. And in which case, you can put comments down here. Spoilers, go ahead. Spoilers in the comments. We can talk about that. And yeah, I'm just interested to see what you think. But do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button if you can. And you can. It literally takes a second, and it's totally painless. That is your best way to repay me. If you like any video I've ever done, this one or any, just hit that subscribe button. Whenever someone does subscribe, I get an email. So I literally look at your subscriber profile. I say to myself, this person's cool, and thank you to this individual. And you're helping grow this horror nerd community, which, that's my whole point of this. Also hit that notification bell button, because that way you'll know whenever I'm putting up a new movie review or a haul video or unboxing or any of the other random stuff I do. And yeah, that's appreciated. But regardless, I appreciate you taking your time to watch this. And until next time, keep it brutal.